Podcast, 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 podcast. Podcast, 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 podcast. Podcast, 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 podcast. Any of you guys can jump in whenever you want to.
You keep skipping around the song.
I'm not going to sing the whole song. Why won't you guys support me?
I am supporting you.
Because I didn't know what part you were going to sing next. I didn't want to look like more of an idiot than I already knew.
Every part is interchangeable. They're all the same. It doesn't matter. Start again. Podcast, podcast. Hi, everybody. My name is Jackson McMurray.
My name is Adeline McMurray.
And my name is Anna Maguire.
And this is No Nerds Allowed Star Wars Phase 2.
Just has like a little hook at the end.
Right, that little coda.
Yeah.
And it just cuts out. It's good stuff.
Okay, well now you've addressed it, so it's ruined.
No, well, it doesn't matter.
It's
ruined.
cool.
This is our second episode in a row where we continue to sing after the theme music starts playing.
Yeah, no, yeah.
It's okay though. Because it's the best song ever written, and it's even better when it's sung by 3 people in random order.
Simultaneously.
Yeah.
Simultaneously.
All right. So this is a big episode for us. We've been spending about a year recording podcasts where we just talk about Star Wars too much when we're not supposed to. So now we've finally reached a point where we can just talk about Star Wars and like on purpose.
Jackson, any time that you're talking about Star Wars is a time when you're not supposed to be talking about Star Wars.
What's that supposed to mean?
Star Wars is like Fight Club. You're not supposed to talk about Star Wars.
You don't like it when I talk about Star Wars?
It's a clever joke that I don't want to have to explain because I have no explanation for it.
Okay.
But it was really good. And
I know it was.
Okay, Anna, do you want to introduce yourself, plug your stuff if they don't know who you are?
Hi, I'm Anna Maguire of Find Us Alive fame. That's the podcast that I make. You can locate it on Twitter at Site107. It's a narrative sci-fi about people that are stuck in a pocket dimension.
Yeah, it's not that good though.
It's really super bad, and Jackson plays the worst character.
So today we did indeed watch Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. We did a poll on Twitter where we asked if we should watch them in release order or in chronological order, and unanimously 3 of you decided that.
And how many people responded to that whole poll, Jackson?
3. That's what I said.
All
3
right,
of them
cool.
unanimously decided we should do release order. Because people are just hungry for that prequels talk, I guess.
Because
we can talk about the prequels. We can and will talk about them.
We're about to.
Yeah, that's what this podcast is about. Welcome.
As a society, we've just been like, listen, the prequels are a hot mess, but we're going to talk about them as much as humanly possible.
It's what they deserve.
Yeah.
So,
For better or worse.
George Lucas deserves to be shit on a little bit. Can I just say?
Yeah. Okay.
Metaphorically and literally, someone shit on George Lucas.
My big take about Phantom Menace is this. Are you guys ready for this?
Yeah,
No, wait. Give me a second.
Yeah,
just
get
gonna write
ready.
it down.
I mean, like, it's just something I actually want to say, though. It's just that this
Okay,
isn't one of my
now
joke.
I'm ready.
This isn't one of my joke takes that's gonna be funny. It's just something I actually want to say. I don't think this movie, in terms of the story they're telling, just doesn't need to exist at all, right?
Oh, definitely.
It really does not.
And I don't even necessarily mean don't make the prequels. I mean, even if you're telling this story, even if you're telling the prequels, none of the information, none of the world that you posit in this first episode is relevant or necessary to the story that goes forward. If we started, honestly, we could have even just started at Revenge of the Sith, right?
Yeah.
I feel like these movies, are giving you a lot of information that's just not important to the broader idea of this prequel story. What?
I'd like to stop you for one moment because I think you're positing that we leave out of the Star Wars universe the fact that Anakin hates sand.
Right.
That's
well,
true.
he could
That's
still
true.
say that he
plot.
hates sand in Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, but he doesn't though.
But he could. Okay, but it would be different. It would be different if it were that way.
Okay, we're talking about an alternate universe where
an alternate universe where the only prequel is the third one.
yeah, and they're all kind of
And
smooshed together.
and when Obi-Wan cuts off his legs, he gets sand in the stump.
And he goes, I hate sand.
Oh
I
God,
hate you!
sand!
I hate you! And sand!
In that order!
I hate you almost as much as I hate sand!
Or Obi-Wan's like, you hate me? And he's like, no! I hate sand!
I was talking to the sand in my stump!
See, there's an added level of this to me because I'm in the same building as Jackson. So I can hear him yelling through my headphones, but also yelling through the wall right next to me.
So, Anna.
Yes.
Miss Maguire, how do you feel about Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace?
I'm going to level with you for a second.
Oh, God.
I don't think this movie is as bad as people say it is.
Yeah.
For me personally,
Right.
the pros outweigh the cons.
Yeah, I think
this movie. And make no mistake, there are a lot of cons, but
Don't get me wrong, please.
Mhm.
Like, it's not bad. It's in no way good.
It's just, I don't know, I feel
Yeah.
like this movie gets an unnecessarily bad rap because, like,
They
I
make
don't know,
a lot of
especially-
weird decisions. Just like as a whole film, they make a lot of weird decisions.
Right.
And the
Yes,
one
they
I would
do.
like to start with of asking why did you do this is why is Anakin 7 years old? I don't understand why he's so baby. He does not need to
Okay,
be so
as-
baby.
that child actor is terrible,
I
but
know.
also he's honestly very cute.
Okay, I want to mount a defense
I think he's
of him.
adorable.
Okay, hold on. I have a take about him, though, because he sucks most of the time, but he is really great at selling the pod racing scene, like, genuinely.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I think his performance in that scene is almost enough to make up for the whole rest of the movie.
Anytime
where
he
blows.
says any line of dialogue,
Yeah.
the whole entire film.
But, like, the
Yeah.
sequence where, like, his pod racer's coming apart and he's, like, twiddling all those dials and, like, moving stuff around and, like, it feels really good to watch and he sells it so completely and, like, commits to it so totally that, like,
Yeah.
it's a nonsense, realistically, what they're showing you. It's just a guy twiddling a bunch of random objects, but, like, his performance
looks
is good
purposeful.
enough that he sells it. Yeah, he's purposeful. I think
Yeah.
that is a really important element of this performance and a really important scene. That's what I'll say in defense of that kid.
We can get to the pod racing scene.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Right.
we all have.
Okay. So before we dive into the movie, I have a segment I want to be doing on these Star Wars episodes, which is Jackson does as much of a obscure canon deep dive as he can
Oh god.
between the movies. Now,
You're doing an unraveled about the Star Wars deep lore.
yeah, not really, just a little bit. Because there's not a lot of content that takes place before Episode 1.
No.
At least in the modern Disney canon. There are a couple of books that's like an origin story for Count Dooku and like a story about Qui-Gon Jinn, I think. That, like, I don't care about Star Wars novels. I will never read a Star Wars novel for this podcast. Which is not to talk down on it. I
Cut
want
to Jackson reading a Star Wars novel.
Yeah, I want to be able to look at the Star Wars. If I can't look at the Star Wars, it's hard for me to care that much about it. But the things that I did read, there's a one-off comic book about Qui-Gon Jinn that's not that cool. It's just like, oh, I'm Qui-Gon Jinn. I am on a mission. There's a war on some other planet. I'm going to try to figure it out. And then he kind of figures it out with diplomacy. And you're like, that's cool, I guess.
I like
Cool,
that.
good job, Obi-Wan.
That was a good 15 minutes of my life I spent reading that one comic book with no point. But there is also a Darth Maul comic book series that is actually pretty good. So it sort of just fleshes out his character, that it's talking about him and Palpatine and their like relationship, where Palpatine is constantly telling Barth Maul,
Bart Simpson.
Barth Simpson, that they both got spiky heads. That might be something.
Somebody write that down.
He's constantly telling Darth Maul, like, yo, we're the Sith and we're gonna start doing evil shit soon enough, but right now we're a secret. And I know you want to kill a whole bunch of Jedi so bad, but you can't yet. You gotta lay low. And the story is about Darth Maul being like, I want to kill a Jedi so fucking bad that he like...
And Palpatine just has to like pull his backpack leash a little bit.
Right. Well, no, but the story is him like going underneath or going behind Palpatine's back and like tracking down this like young Padawan who's like stranded on some planet and like tracking them down and killing them and being like, oh, finally I got that out of my system. I killed a Jedi. I'll be good for a minute until we get out of hiding. But then at the end, Palpatine is like, I knew all along. I knew you were doing it and I let you. And he was like, oh, wow. Anyway, pretty good.
Why though?
He's addicted to Jedi murder.
Pretty much. It weirdly...
So much that he needs twice the lightsaber.
But it genuinely, like, the way it's written, it really reads like almost like an allegory for, like, teen sexuality. Just having absolutely no outlet for this, like, primal desire you have. And for some people, it's sex, and for Darth Maul, it's he wants to kill a Jedi so bad, and he like, can't control himself.
Man.
Yeah.
Wear protection when you kill a Jedi.
And yeah, that's kind of it.
Also get cut in half, and also crabs.
Oh, and there's also... And there's also a story in the, like, mainline Star Wars comic book that's just, like, Luke finding Obi-Wan's diary, and Obi-Wan's diary is like, oh, I'm gonna tell a story that Yoda told me one time of when he went to a planet and solved some problems. But it's also kind of interesting because then when Luke goes to that planet, he learns that even though Yoda solved all their problems in that instant, after he left and never checked up with them again, shit got really bad for them because of his actions much later that he never knew about, which is sort of thematically interesting considering that Yoda is basically a complete and total fuck up throughout the entirety of this franchise.
Yeah, no, this is very much a modern take. I think, like, I've only heard it recently, but I think everybody on the planet agrees with it, is that Yoda is the worst. He's the worst. He does everything bad. He's mad at everyone. He always fucks up. Like, he's just the worst. He's the worst.
I do really like the take on the Jedi,
but,
though.
and it's also not Yoda's fault, because if you just look at Yoda in the original trilogy, he's just like, oh, I used to be a master, and now I'm a silly old man, but actually I'm very wise. And it's like, okay, that's fun. But then they had to, like, make him in charge of everything and just fuck up so badly so that Darth Vader would happen. So every, like, additional piece of Star Wars lore has just been Yoda fucking up to the nth degree. And it's just, Yoda, you fucking suck, dog.
I feel like that's something that we could get to a little bit more in detail once we get to our Revenge of the Sith episode.
Yeah.
Where Yoda has that great interaction with fucking Chewbacca, where he's just like, oh, man, I really screwed the pooch on this one, didn't I? Oh, well, all right, see you, Chewbacca. I'm going to go live in a swamp. Peace
anyway,
out.
Bye.
Peace out. Bye.
Yeah.
Hope this turns out okay.
I kind of ruined society. Whoops-a-daisy. See you guys later. Okay, so that's it. That's been my Star Wars ancillary content corner.
Okay, great.
Super quick, I should look up... Oh, go ahead.
Okay, great. I've said this before, and I'll say it a million times, is that whenever I watch the original trilogy, I always felt like I was lacking complete context of what was going on. Like, they talk about the Senate and the Republic and stuff like that, but without giving me any context to, like, what that actually means or what that actually refers to. Mm. And I feel like that adds to the story. If you have the story of good and evil, but good and evil are really basic concepts that don't really have anything behind them, it's a little bit lacking. So, like, when they say those things, like, oh, I want to know, like, what is the Galactic Empire, like, really in charge of? Like, what's actually going on here, like, behind the scenes of just Luke and Leia and Han Solo, like, running around and doing things? And so when the prequels are like, we're gonna talk about like the politics of like the Star Wars universe because it's like interesting and it makes sense because it's a war movie and we gotta talk about the politics of war. And I'm like, oh hell yeah, like that's what I want. I like want more information. And then we talk about trade routes for like 2 hours. And I just have no fucking clue what anyone is doing the whole movie.
Yeah, is it just me, or did the politics in this movie make no sense, or am I just dumb?
It makes no sense.
Okay, look. I made a special care to really pay attention to see if I could figure that out. Because I've seen this movie about 800 times since I was about 5 years old. I've seen this movie so many times, and I have no fucking clue what's going on in the first, like, 20 minutes of it.
It's, like, incomprehensible.
Yeah,
it's such nonsense. So, like, as best I can figure, the Trade Federation are sort of under the thumb of Palpatine, who has this galaxy brain plan to engineer a war between these two factions that he is in charge of both of them secretly, right? So he's like, yo, Trade Federation, be super shady and do a bunch of whack shady shit with the economy in order to spark a war between you and the Republic. And it has to do with, like, taxes and trade routes and whatever. That's
Right.
I think that's as much as needs to be said. Yeah? Does that make sense? Is that fair?
But they say much more than that without saying anything.
Yeah. And you just open... I also want to just make note that, like, the opening of this movie... Like, the whole first 20 minutes of this movie just blow. But especially, like, the very opening... Like, that's one of the first things you learn when you're, like, learning about storytelling... is, like, make sure the first beat that you open your story with is, like, one of your best moments. Like, you have to open with something exciting, otherwise no one will care. And this movie opens with, like... First of all, there's the crawl that says, like, oh, the Republic is being unfairly taxed, and they're concerned about it. They're about to send people to go into negotiations with the Trade Federation. You're like, wow, okay, not interested.
Okay, like, oh my god.
And then you open on some anonymous pilots being like, can we land in your ship? And the ship is like, yes, you are okay to land. And they land in the ship, and then we cut to two guys we don't know inside, and they're like, we're about to go into negotiations with some people who are doing some weird tax stuff. And you're like, wow, cool movie. Why?
I love this Star
cool.
Wars
What the
movie.
fuck is going on?
And it's just like...
But then what makes it worse, so you don't know what's going on, and then George Lucas just hits you over the head with the most racist aliens that I've ever seen.
I know!
And
Yeah, honestly.
Oh, man.
God.
There are
Like, I
so
can't
many
even
racist
do-
aliens in this
I
movie.
can't
so
even
many
do an
racist
impression
aliens.
of them because it's such a racist, like,
Yeah.
Japanese stereotype. Like, I can't.
And so,
God.
okay.
Yeah.
Like, basically, we're not given any reason to care about what's happening in the movie
At any
until
point.
probably until like you get to the chase scene underwater and they start to actually have a personality, you know?
Yeah.
Like, they never give you any sense of pathos for Qui-Gon or Obi-Wan in the first, like, 20 minutes or so of this movie.
No.
They're just kind of bland, and you're, like, following them around, and there's not really a B-plot, and you're just following them, and you're like, who are these? I mean, you know who Obi-Wan is, but you're just like, why do I care about what they're doing right now? Like, why is this important? And, you know, it's not. That was my big take, is that none of it is important. But, like... There's nothing to care about in the first 20 minutes of this movie.
Yeah.
I would argue maybe the whole movie, actually. I don't care about any of these motherfuckers.
I care about Padme's costumes very much.
Right, yeah.
Her costuming's great. I hate the way that Padme talks when she's being the queen. That monotonous, like, one tone way that she talks makes her sound like an idiot, and I hate listening to her talk. She's like, the Trade Federation will not go through there, Senator. Just, like, every single line that she delivers is the queen, and I hate it. I hate it so much. I hate it. Padme, why?
The Republic will not be seen consorting with the Trade Federation, Senator.
It's not good.
And then-
It's
No,
not,
you have to open up your mouth more.
It's,
And
The
it's
Trade
kind of...
Federation.
I don't know what kind of acting decision that was, or if I choose to blame George Lucas, that he was like, you have to sound regal, which means don't emote about anything, even though you're talking about the slaughter of your people. Just don't emote anytime. Just don't.
Right. And that's the oh shoot, what was I gonna say? Oh, it's almost like the Christian Bale Batman thing, where it's like when he's talking to somebody who knows that he's Batman, but he's still doing the Batman voice, and you're like, why are you doing the Batman voice? Like, when Padme comes forward and reveals herself as actually being the queen, even though we didn't know she was the whole time, she suddenly adopts the Queen Amidala voice, and you're like, talking. Why? Why does it need to be this way?
What I've decided that George Lucas's whole mindset when creating this film is that he doesn't care about what anybody's doing or saying or why they're doing anything or why they're saying anything. He just wants to do things. Mm-hmm. He doesn't care why we're in the underwater city. He just wants to be in the underwater city so he can show us his racist aliens, and that's just all he cares about. He wants there to be a cool big monster that eats another big monster, so we have to go underwater. Why? Because I want to, and my name's George Lucas. Yeah.
So, Anna, I'll pose this question to you: if we had to rank, Watto, Newt Gunray, and Jar Jar Binks in order of racism, how would you rank them?
Who's that second one?
The guy from the beginning, the Japanese guy from the beginning.
Oh my god.
I mean, okay, what puts me over the edge is the fact that Jar Jar Binks, definitely says master, but, in his weird racist accent, and I just can't. Oh my god. Yeah. It's the worst thing in the world.
God, why? Okay, I can appreciate Jar Jar as, one of the characters that pioneered, modern CGI and mocap, but, why is he there?
Right, yeah.
Why is he there? He doesn't doesn't do fucking anything.
And then they proceed to try to erase his existence from the rest of the films. So not only did you do a bad job, but now he just no longer exists. Right. He sucks so bad that you have to annihilate him.
Okay, can I drop some information about George Lucas for a minute here? Will you humor me in that?
Absolutely, you can.
So, basically, his reputation throughout, the late 60s, early 70s when he was coming up was that he was, a really technical guy. He didn't have a very good eye for story or character or anything like that, but he loved the technical nuts and bolts of filmmaking, right? And his first movie that he makes, it's got a weird title. Hold on.
Did you know that George Lucas went to film school? I can't believe that.
Yeah.
That blows my mind every time I hear that.
So here's
Okay, yeah, but have you met guys at film school,
That's
though?
true. That's very true.
Okay, so his first movie was called THX 1138. It's this weird, so basically he's been second unit directors and production managers and stuff on all these movies, and he's this great technical filmmaker, right? He has a really good eye for like I said, the nuts and bolts of things,
technical stuff. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he makes his own movie, THX 1138. It's this weird, almost non-literal 1984 semi-adaptation about this dystopian sci-fi future that's just so cold and weirdly plotless, but it's gorgeous, right? Which makes sense.
Right.
It's perfectly executed, but just weird and nebulous and never quite solidifies into anything. And then all of his friends in the film industry are we know you're good at this. We need you to really buckle down, maybe take a script from somebody else and try to do something more plot and character and just generally more populous, Yeah. So he takes that as a challenge, and he makes American Graffiti, which is this, movie about teenagers in the 50s hanging out, and it becomes this important part of the cultural tapestry, and it's a good movie, everybody loves it. And then he moves on to do Star Wars, and at this point he's pretty much learned that he fucking hates directing and is bad at it. By which I mean directing actors, not necessarily the work part of directing. But I feel like that all makes a lot of sense here, because he gets Star Wars, and Star Wars is sort of him marrying his THX 1138 side and his American Graffiti side, and putting them together into one thing, and it becomes this phenomenal success. And
Right.
then, but by then he's like, I'm out. And I mean, he's not out, but he's like, I don't want to direct these anymore. And he gets somebody else to like direct actors and do that job for the next 2 Star Wars movies. But when he comes back to do these prequels, he's working on his own. So all of his worst tendencies are just like, he loves these big things. He loves this intricate set design. He loves this like really mechanical, really like literal style of, not literal, but like, I keep using the phrase nuts and bolts, but it's apt. Like this nuts and bolts style of filmmaking. And that works greatly to his advantage in sequences like the pod racing sequence, which is like fucking incredible technical storytelling. But when it comes to like building a story, he just doesn't have the capacity to do a good job at that, you know?
No, it's people say it all the time, but like the original Star Wars trilogy was like truly saved in editing. Like just the amount of stuff that they had to like piece together in order to make it coherent and good was like just so much effort on the editor's part. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I don't know. And I feel like that now that I've like done some more research on George Lucas and like what his whole deal is, like the prequels just make so much more sense to me now than they ever have before. So, okay, we're at the beginning. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan show up, and they're like, hey, we're here to negotiate about the taxes or whatever. And they're like, actually, we're going to kill you. So then...
0 to 60.
Right, so they're like, oh, they tried to kill us, something's weird. So they're like, then they blow up our ship, so they're like, let's get down to the planet. And then they meet Jar Jar Binks and decide to hang out with Jar Jar Binks for like 20 minutes.
Yep.
And I can't figure out why they do that, but
but they do.
There's like this contrived reason that's like, oh, we need someone to help us like go through this gulch because you're an underwater guy, and then they just kind of like let him stay there indefinitely.
Right.
Yeah. We have to get to the underwater place because we think that they have a ship and we need a ship to get off of the planet. It's like, okay. Right. We'll use Jar Jar Binks to get there. And it's like, great. And we get there, and all the people are like, hey, Jar Jar Binks fucking sucks. We all hate him. And everyone in the audience is like, mood. And then they're talking to the king. They're talking to the king, and the king's like, okay, whatever. You mind trick me into giving you a ship. Like, here's a ship. Get out of here. But then Qui-Gon Jinn just, like, turns around, and he's like, also, I want Jar Jar to come with us. And I cannot fathom why.
Like, just why?
No, stop! Don't do it!
Yes. Like, just because they're like, oh, he's gonna get punished because they don't tell us what he did. What did he do?
No, he's not going to be punished. He's going to be punished.
God. But what did he do to get evicted?
He was clumsy.
Oh,
yeah,
that's
he
right.
like
so
fell
that
over.
literally
and,
was the reason.
Yeah,
They're
he like spilled
him,
food on the king or something, so they're gonna kill him. Okay, I mean, look, the subtext is probably also that he's just really fucking annoying, right?
Yeah,
like
everybody hates him.
If he were an upstanding citizen and he spilled food on somebody, I'm sure they wouldn't have tried to kill him, but they were like, this is the opportunity, finally, to get rid of Jar Jar once
Jar Jar
and for
Binks
all.
to fucking leave.
God,
okay.
this guy's making all of us look bad. Can we please just kill him?
But the thing about Jar Jar is that, like, there are some scenes in this movie where he kind of works, where he is funny.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Like, the scene where they're underwater and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are just like, everything's fine, don't worry about it. And he's just like, like, freaking out like a reasonable person, and they're always just like, hey, no, it's chill. And Jar Jar's just like, it's not chill. Like, that scene...
There's a fish the size of a mountain!
Yeah. And, like, that scene really works. There's, like, a real comic dynamic there, you know? But, like, the rest of the time when Jar Jar is just like, oh, Misa not feeling too good, oh, step in doo-doo, and you're just like, fuck, this is such nothing.
And, like, you're anticipating, like, oh, he's gonna chill out and have a character arc, and it's like no, he has like one line where he tells the army to shut up, and then like the rest of it he's just exactly the same.
The weirdest thing about Jar Jar is that sometimes he's there for comic relief, But then sometimes they don't even do that, and he's just on screen for no reason. Like, what's that bit where they're building the pod racer, and he, like, fucks up, and he drops something, and he falls into the thing, and, like, it numbs his tongue, so, like, he can't talk, and then he gets his hand stuck in the thing, and you're like, oh, something comedic is gonna happen to all these things, building up to something. But then Padme just walks over and takes his hand out of it, and then he walks off screen. And, like, you just made us look at that for, like, 3 whole minutes. For nothing. Yeah. There wasn't even a bad joke. He didn't even step in doo-doo. Literally nothing happened. You forgot to tell the joke.
Yeah.
You forgot the joke,
You forgot the doo-doo.
And that's the weird thing, is that, like, the original Star Wars movies don't have a lot of, like, explicit comic relief, right?
No.
Like, they're fun movies, and there are lines that are, like, clever or witty, but there's never, like, any broad characters that are meant to be, like, a comic relief character, quote-unquote, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless you count, like, Yoda, maybe.
Maybe. But he, like, comes back with, like, character development.
Yeah.
Luke is his own comic relief.
Right,
I'm gonna go to the States and get the power converters!
But,
I'm gonna point a lightsaber directly at my eye socket.
But I think it's weird that George Lucas decided to include this character in it, and there's all these videos behind the scenes of George Lucas being like, oh yes, Jar Jar Binks, he's the key to all of this. Jar Jar Binks is my greatest creation. And you're like, okay, sure,
really?
fine.
He doesn't
self-burn,
the movie doesn't even like Jar Jar Binks because they don't use him for anything.
Right.
Like, if you're like, this is my favorite character, I really like this funny guy that I've made, I'm gonna, like,
right.
I'm gonna, like, make him vital to the plot, I would accept that. He's like, he's funny, but then he does something. But he doesn't do anything!
Right. But I was gonna say is that, like, he never, like, wrote jokes into Star Wars. I can only assume because that's just not his natural proclivity, you know? And for some reason he decided this movie needed more jokes, or I don't know, maybe somebody told him that it needed more jokes. But, like, he is so colossally bad at writing jokes. Like, everything that seems like it's a joke just is completely missing a punchline. It's like, animal poops and Jar Jar looks at it and says, P.U., and you're like, that was it? That was the whole joke? Like, that is, like, the first half of a joke. Something funny has to happen after that.
Or Jar Jar Binks is walking down the street, sees a stall with food on it, just fucking eats the food like an animal, and then he gets accused of stealing, so he spits out the food, and it hits the guy in the head, and then the guy tries to kill him, but then a 7-year-old shows up and tells the grown man that he's gonna beat his butt in a race, and that's the whole scene.
Right. I also just made note at the beginning for a lot of this movie, there's, like, very little parallel action. Like, we're mostly just hanging out with Qui-Gon, like, kind of the whole time, and they'll cut back to, like, Obi-Wan on the ship making a phone call, or, like,
God, just
Padme.
Obi-Wan this whole movie is just
doesn't do
calling
anything.
Qui-Gon and
Right.
being like, I don't know if this is gonna work, Qui-Gon. What if it goes bad? And
Right.
that's just Obi-Wan the whole movie.
Right.
And you're like, wow, I really wanted to watch Obi-Wan.
Qui-Gon, my brain is tingling.
I really wanted to watch Obi-Wan do something in this movie,
Right.
but I guess he's just not going to.
Okay. We've been shitting on this movie pretty hard so far.
Yes.
Because it deserves it.
But
I think that once we get to Tatooine, sort of the clouds part, and we're like, okay, we're in a real movie now. Like,
yeah.
once we get to Tatooine, it's like...
Still not a good movie, but a movie, and that's
Right.
saying something.
It's like when we get to Tatooine, we know exactly where we are, we know exactly what people are trying to do, and there are clear stakes, right? There's an attack happening somewhere else, and we need to get back there to try to fix it. Our ship is broken down, we need to figure out how to fix our ship and get to where we're trying to go. And that is a perfectly clear, perfectly simple set of circumstances that could have... I mean, like I said, we could have maybe even just started there.
Yeah,
like,
that would have been fine.
Yeah.
But whatever. Like, I don't know, and the first part of this movie, like, the stakes are so weirdly... I mean, there aren't really any stakes. We don't have any investment in anything.
No, we don't.
And it takes you so long to, like, get to a point where you care about anything.
It's like Star Wars vomit. Like if you just put a whole bunch of Star Wars elements into a jar and then shook it and then like poured it out on a table, that's the first
Right.
20 minutes of this
That's
movie.
Yeah.
really accurate.
Okay, but
But
the fish sequence does rule.
those fish are
The fish
cool.
sequence is cool.
When the
Yeah.
big fish comes and eats
I like
the
the
other
one where it
fish.
looks like a fish, but then it like actually just has arms and like walks like a person.
Yeah,
It's
no,
like a
it
Godzilla
rules.
thing.
It's another one of those things. It's like, this is what George Lucas is good at. Like, this
Yeah.
rips and is really cool and fun to watch. And this is like him working at his peak physical form. I also wrote down that I really like it when they slice up battle droids, and you can see like
Yeah.
the weird cross sections of their bodies as they like fall apart. That's super cool. I'm into that.
I like that.
I have an attachment to battle droids because we had a Phantom Menace like big Lego set when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
So I see those and I just automatically think of like the way that their little heads like popped onto their bodies.
Right.
Oh yeah.
I was so into this movie as a kid. It was the only one that we had on VHS.
Me too.
So for a little while, this was the only Star Wars I had direct access to. I remember I had a birthday party one year where I just had a whole bunch of friends over and we just watched Phantom Menace. I don't know if any of the other kids, I mean, I was young. I was probably like 8 or 9. I don't know if the other kids at that party were cognizant enough to be like, this movie kind of blows or not.
Yeah.
If they were just
Oh,
humoring me.
definitely not. Are you kidding me?
I don't know.
Yeah, I loved this movie when I was a kid.
And it's just like, it's so weird. It's weird to try to imagine why we were so into it, you know?
Yeah.
Because
Well,
so much of it
It's
is
Star Wars.
I mean, it is.
Like,
It's Star
that's
Wars.
just the whole reason.
But like so much of it is boring nonsense that it's like
Well,
I can't
it's
even
Star
make myself
Wars.
carry about now.
It's Star Wars, and also there's a little kid in it, and you're a little kid, so you're like, oh, I can be
That's
Star
me.
Wars.
I could grow up to
Oh my God.
be
I
Space
think-
Hitler.
I think part of it is like you watch the scenes where they're like something Senate Trade Federation and you're like, yes, I know what they're talking about.
Right.
Yes.
I am a big kid and I
Right.
understand.
That's
I just
true.
want to watch the pod racing scene on repeat.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's true. There was something that felt kind of grown up about Star Wars while I was watching it.
Yeah. And then you grow up and you're like, this doesn't make any sense.
That's right.
This
yeah.
is for dumb babies.
This is nonsense.
Okay, I also want to say that I think Sebulba might just be like my favorite Star Wars character. Like,
Actually, though,
his design is so cool.
Sebulba's got a cool design.
And he's
I
just
hate
like this
looking at
rough
him.
and tumble. You don't like Sebulba?
I don't like looking at him.
He walks with his arms and he grabs things with his feet.
I
Yeah.
That's
don't,
cool.
yeah, I
That's
don't
cool.
like something about the way his like skin and like tendons are animated. He just looks like he's like a squid mixed with a chicken skeleton, and I don't like it.
Yeah, that's what's cool about him.
And I
He's just
that's
like
what I
this-
don't
Yeah,
like about
he's pretty
it.
cool. I like Sebulba.
He's like this scummy shitlord from this
But he's got a
shitty
feud
desert planet.
with a literal 7-year-old, so I have
I know.
no respect for him.
Okay,
because
imagine if you were
I'm
the
gonna
best
race
hockey
against
player.
This baby.
Imagine if you were the best hockey player in the world, Adeline. You
Yeah.
were known the world renowned for your hockey playing. And then suddenly a 6-year-old kid shows up and fucking wipes the floor with your ass at hockey.
You think a hockey
Except it's
player
more-
wouldn't punch a 6-year-old in the face?
Right.
It's less hockey and more NASCAR.
You think a NASCAR driver wouldn't punch a 6-year-old in the face?
Well, of course not. They just run him over.
Yeah,
And
that's
Sebulba
what.
doesn't do that.
Oh, so you're saying
tries
that
to.
you're saying that Sebulba should just beat the shit out of Anakin?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
With his weird little feet arms.
Yes. When that scene when he's beating up Jar Jar Binks and Anakin comes over and he's like, hey, I'll stop this fight. What's up? You're stinky, Sebulba. Why doesn't Sebulba just grab his head and shove it into the dirt? That's what I don't understand.
Here's what I do. If I were writing it, I would be like, "Oh, stay. We'll settle it on the track, Slimo." And then Sebulba like comes to attack him, but then Qui-Gon intervenes and like cuts off his leg or something. And that way, there's like more personal stakes when we get into the pod racing scene because Sebulba has like extra vendetta against Anakin and his squad going into that race.
Yeah.
That's my punch
I
up.
would also like to point out that no one on the entire planet of the Earth ever gets to call Rey a Mary Sue when
Ever
Anakin
again.
was a literal Jesus birth and
Yeah.
like
Oh
flew
my
a
God.
plane when he was 6 with no experience.
Yeah.
I've said this since the beginning of time. Do you know what would have been 10 billion times more interesting than Anakin being Jesus? Literally anybody in the entire fucking galaxy being his father. That would be more interesting
Right.
than
When I
him
was a
being
kid,
fucking
I-
Star Wars Jesus.
When I was a kid, I thought that's what it was. Like, I thought, like, when she was like,
Like,
there
she's
was
lying?
no father, I was like, oh, like, he left them when, like, before he was
Right,
born.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, like, she, like, raised him by herself. That's what I thought that meant. And
Right.
now I'm, like, watching it and I'm like, oh, no.
Oh,
it
God.
means, like, there literally was not.
And then they go to the Jedi Council, and Qui-Gon's like, I think the Force conceived this child. And these two, like, women Jedi just, like, look at each other, and I'm like, me too, ladies. Please make him stop talking.
Yes, Queen.
Yes,
Yes,
Queen.
please.
Please assassinate him.
Oh, my God. That's so. The Force conceived this. Oh, my God.
And just the
Stop-
two
just
women are just
stop.
like, oh my fucking God.
That's not as cool as you
Yeah.
think it is.
Especially
So,
because
okay.
you're drawing a weird connection between Space Jesus and Space Hitler, and I don't know if I'm comfortable with that, if I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot to unpack
It's
with
rough. It's rough.
but and I don't know. Like, I mean, like you said, I feel like just anything
Just
would
literally
be more
anybody.
interesting.
If
If you
it's
can just
some-
make it, you could make it like, oh, Yoda's my dad. It's like, that's kind
God.
of something. Or you could be like, oh, it's just a nobody. And then you could like introduce him as a character later and have him sort of a purpose
Man,
later.
you
That
know
would
what
be
would have been 10
interesting.
billion times more interesting than Rey being Palpatine's daughter? If she was just literally anybody else in the universe's daughter? Why does Star Wars
Yeah.
do this?
It's
Why?
fine.
Why did 9-year-old Anakin build C-3PO?
Yeah, okay, so that
Why?
is something else. Because everything else in this movie, up to this point, a lot of it is bad, but none of it is completely irrational, right? You're
Yeah.
like, oh, this didn't turn out well, and this was just sort of a wrong-headed
idea.
story conceit, it's boring. But, like, having Anakin build C-3PO is literally the most baffling, inarticulate story decision I could possibly imagine. I
It's like
wrote
you
down-
can't retcon an entire character.
Yeah, it doesn't
Like,
make any sense. First of all, why is he like a regular run-of-the-mill protocol droid if he's like a homebrew a kid built in his basement?
Yeah.
Why doesn't Anakin remember him later or interact with him at all?
Why
And-
don't I get a fucking emotional scene between
Right.
Darth Vader and C-3PO? I want it and I never get it.
And most importantly, like, what does this make better? This doesn't. There's nothing is enriched by
No.
the idea that Anakin built C-3PO. It's pointless.
It's literally the same as Yoda and Chewbacca being friends. Like, it does nothing. Like, you didn't
Right.
even need to say this. It doesn't do anything.
But Yoda
And it's also very weird and raises a lot of like questions that there isn't an answer to.
Right. But Yoda and Chewbacca being friends makes sense still. Like,
At
it's
least,
pointless,
yeah.
but it tracks, I guess.
Yeah.
But, like, C-3PO being built by Anakin just doesn't make sense. Like, and it's so weird that George Lucas is so anal about, like, fixing the original movies to line up with his vision that was extended in the prequels, you know?
Yeah.
Like, adding Hayden Christensen's ghost into Return of the Jedi and, like,
That
making
that
sure...
bitch doesn't deserve a ghost because he murdered a room full of children. He doesn't deserve a ghost.
That's not the point. It's not what I'm talking about. But, like, he's so anal about making everything fit exactly the way it should be, like, even retroactively. But for some reason, the fact that Anakin built C-3PO is just still there and
just
still
has
doesn't
to
make any
exist.
goddamn sense.
They should shoot a new scene.
I would prefer that, frankly.
This should be a scene where Darth Vader is like walking down the hall and like sees C-3PO and is like, hey. And like that's it.
And that's it. No, okay, so here's what I would have done. Anakin didn't build C-3PO. their family needs a robot for some reason. Maybe Anakin's mother is like sick, and that would be another reason why he doesn't want to leave her. Like Anakin's mother needs help for some reason. They need a droid to do it. But they're super poor and they're slaves. So the only robot that they can afford is this shitty, like, no coverings robot that doesn't even do the job that they need it to do, but they just need it to do this. Like, it's supposed to, like, talk to people, and they're like, we need you to, like, cook and help my mom around. Like, that's what I would have done. And that would have been interesting.
Or even something like, hey, slave, fix this broken robot so I can sell it again.
Yeah.
Right. Like his project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just, why did he build C-3PO? It doesn't make any sense.
And another piece of punch-up, Adeline and I were talking about this while we were watching the movie. Nothing, like, obviously it's creepy that Anakin is, like, 7 and Padme is, like, 15 in this movie.
It's
like, that is well-worn territory. I don't feel like we even need to, like, bring it up that much. But,
yeah,
like, narratively, there's no reason Anakin couldn't, like, also be 15 in this movie, right? Like, I feel like this might even be more interesting if he were just older, you know?
Yeah.
And it would, I mean, a lot of things would make more sense.
Yeah,
well,
and we would probably get a more charismatic actor, and it would make more sense that the Jedi are like, he's too old, we can't trade him. If you were like a teenager, it's like, oh, he's practically an adult. Like, he can't start learning Jedi stuff now.
Yeah, because Yoda is like, he's too old, he can't be a Jedi. And it's like, wait, how young do you have to be? And they're like, like 5 years old. How old is he? Like 6. He can't, he's too old. And it's like, this is stupid, Yoda.
It's like, damn, Yoda started me young. Wow.
Also, I said Sebulba's my favorite Star Wars character. Even though he is very racist, I think Watto is my second favorite Star Wars character.
Oh, Watto is so racist.
Watto's great. He's just like, Jedi mind tricks don't work on me. Only money. He's the best. I love Watto.
Oh my god, let's leave this up to fate. I have a chance cube in my pocket. Not like, fucking dice. No. This is Star Wars, so we have to have fucking chance cubes.
And not like, I don't know, a coin.
Or like anything else that already exists in the world. No. I got a chance cube.
See, I think part of this whole movie is that, like, Qui-Gon is basically, like, swindling Watto out of, like, all of his stuff, right?
Yes.
Like,
and it's
I
hilarious.
think because he shows up in Attack of the Clones at some point, and he's just doing his thing. He's, like, still a shop owner or whatever. I think it would be hilarious if he shows up in Attack of the Clones and he's just, like, destitute. He's, like, living in a cardboard box. And he's just like, I will work for food,
And Anakin's like, get fucked.
Fuck Watto. Good flick.
Good imaginary flick that I made up.
Yeah.
Let's make a short film. It's just Watto being in poverty.
Yeah.
So, another thing that irks me, and it's maybe just because I've watched this movie 10 billion times, they pulled the gag where Padme's like, the queen wouldn't like this, and then someone goes, oh, but the queen's not here, and then Padme goes, and it's like, oh god, like, listen, I know you're the queen, and we've made this gag, like, 4 separate times, and it's honestly getting annoying, and I don't know if it's just because I know, or everybody's supposed to know, but it's annoying, and I hate it.
I like it. They only do it, like, twice, and I think it's cool both times.
They do it, like, one time too many.
I actually do think it's kind of cool, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, 2 against 1, you're outvoted.
Doing it once, I'm like, haha, that's funny. But they do it several more times, and I'm like, this is too many times. Like, I get it.
They do it twice. Okay. This is it, Adeline.
Times.
Adeline, you're outvoted. You're outvoted. This is the gavel.
I will turn off Discord, Jackson. I will go into the other room and hit you. I have the ability.
I also, we talked about the chance cube bit. I just want to say also, like, just that dramatic bit where he's like, I don't know, I'll leave it up to chance. Maybe we'll see what fate has to say. And then Qui-Gon, like, rigs it. It's like, why even do that? Just have him say yes. Like, what's the point of this bit?
We just want more Qui-Gon swindling him, I guess, to, like, really
I guess that is kind of fun.
Accentuate the fact. See,
Yeah.
I stopped taking notes after this part because we get to the pod race, and the pod race is the dopest thing on the planet.
Yeah, we can all agree. The entire planet can agree. The pod race.
Yeah.
scene
Yeah,
is
it's
Yeah,
like
just,
maybe
like-
the best part of any Star Wars movie. Like,
Yeah, it's like
so
just the
good.
sound
It's so
design
good.
where every single one of the ships like sounds different. It's
Yeah.
The
just so
sound
cool. It's
design
dope.
of that scene is burned into my brain for the rest of my
It's
life.
fucking incredible. And like just the setup of it, like all the aliens are great. Every pod racer like looks different and works
Yeah.
differently, and they're like all recognizable. The like commentators are fun. Like every part of it is just like so like chef's kiss perfect. It's like, why can't the whole movie be like this? You know?
Yeah, who made this part? Can they make all of it?
I mean, it's like I said, George Lucas made this part. Like this is the
Yeah.
shit he's good at. And then I also wanted to point out there's that one little shot where there's that super pale lady with the ponytail and the nail in her skull who like
Yeah, I
looks
love
at the
her.
pod races for a sec. She, for whatever reason, like spun out to be this like major character in the expanded universe. Her name's Aura Singh, and she's just like
She's
a bounty
dope,
hunter.
And I love her.
Yeah, she just shows up all the time. She's just like one of that like bank of characters that's just like, these are bounty hunters. They show up every once in a while. She teams up with like, you know, IG-88 and Dengar and Cad Bane and all those guys.
And
you
the
know,
rest
she's
of
just
I
them.
don't
around.
know who any of those people are, but I believe you.
Yeah. And I also want to point out that like the majority of that pod racing scene, the score does kick in at the end, but there's no music underneath it. Like it totally just acts like purely on its own merit for the majority of the sequence. And it doesn't need to be like punched up or like enhanced by the awesome John Williams score. Like even without it, it still is like this incredible, striking, like imaginative scene, you know?
Yeah.
And like the stakes are so clear and the suspense is like genuinely earned because you understand what's going to happen if he loses the race. And like the geography of the whole thing is so clear and you know exactly where everything is at all times.
Well, and just how dangerous it is. Like, even
Yeah.
just, like, the act of racing is, like, we see, like, 4 people die in that sequence.
Right. And they've set it up well before. It's like he's never even finished a race. Like this shit's crazy. Like people don't finish it all the time. And like all those bits where they're like dealing with the like weird little crunchy mechanics of the pod racers, like how Anakin's constantly like having to fix shit on his pod racer when his like tether comes untethered and he's like flipping
Yeah.
around and he pulls out his magnet.
He's got that
and-
big magnet thing. Yeah.
It just rips. It's like genuinely, I think, one of the most impressive pieces of filmmaking ever put on screen.
It's so cool that like I love that scene in particular where he has like the rod with the huge magnet on it
Right.
because it's like, oh, he like planned for this scenario to happen.
Yeah. And I brought this up too, but like the kid who plays Anakin like sells this scene really well. And like I also just remember I played the Star Wars Pod Racer game for the Nintendo 64
Oh my gosh, so
like
much.
all the time as a kid. But I just remember because there's that bit in when he goes up the like maintenance ramp and jumps over somebody where like they make sort of a bit of business about him like cutting the engines while he's in the air and then like gunning it, like going full throttle halfway through so he like speeds ahead of somebody, which is cool. But I remember they like made a big mechanic out of that in that game without ever telling you, because like there would be levels where you would have to like go over a jump, and if you just held down the gas the whole time you would die, but if you let it go halfway and then gunned it halfway through you would like make the jump and clear it.
I mean, I think that's pretty dope. That's
Yeah,
cool
but they
game
like
design.
it is cool game design, but they never told you to do that.
That's true.
Like,
Oh yeah.
you just have to figure it out. I don't know. It's just a weird piece of game design that I think is really interesting. I just wanted to bring up that Pod Racer game because that's a
Yeah.
big part of my
Well,
childhood.
that scene is so well developed that game like is just able to just like take it and just like do it like 12 more times because like
Yeah,
every
totally.
single one of the racers is like already fully developed and made, and we get a little snippet of their personality in that scene. So it's like there's no work that they had to do to like make the characters in that video game.
Right. Did you ever play that video game, Anna?
Nah. We didn't get a console until the GameCube.
Oh, really? See,
Yeah.
our parents played video games before we were born. I mean, they weren't like hardcore gamers, but our family has had the Super Nintendo since before we were born, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like we've always had like Mech Warrior and Super Mario World in our house. I'm trying to remember.
My mother was not a terribly big fan of video games, so we
Right.
did not have many for a long time.
Yeah. Our dad is not big into video games. The only kind of video games he ever plays are either like World War II fighter pilot games or games that are mission based where you are in a mech suit. Those are the only genres of games that he cares about. Anyway, there's that sequence in this movie where Anakin's just like, oh, I'm free, I'm packing up my stuff, I'm gonna go home. And he's just like, sorry, C-3PO, you suck ass, I'm not taking you with me, see ya. And you're like, okay, why is C-3PO even here then? Like, what's the point of this?
Do we see C-3PO for the rest of the movie?
No, we don't. He doesn't do anything.
When does C-3PO come back, and how?
I know he's in Attack of the Clones. Because
Yeah,
he
I
has all
know
those
that
antics in the droid factory where he's like, oh,
Yeah.
droids making droids, how queer. And you're like, oh, cool.
And then
bumbles
R2-D2
around the
flies
factory.
somewhere and shoots a man or something.
Right, yeah. Because, yeah, we were talking about this earlier. R2-D2 does too much stuff in new Star Wars. Like,
Yeah.
R2-D2 shouldn't do anything besides, like, roll around and put his weird appendage in walls and stop the trash compactor or whatever.
Yeah, he's literally the robot equivalent of autopilot, but then, like, sometimes they, like, make him fly and give him a gun, and it's like, what are
Right.
we... You can't
Yeah.
do that.
But yeah, and like now he has like a taser and he can spray oil on people and set them on fire and fly, and he has like a whole fucking action fight sequence with 2 super battle droids in Revenge of the Sith, and I hate that. Like, I feel like R2-D2 should just roll around and like just be helpful if he needs to be, and be sassy to C-3PO. Those are the only
That's
things
it.
he should do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Be a little sass robot.
And there's that weird shot where Anakin's talking to C-3PO and the camera weirdly, like, cuts to C-3PO's point of
Terminator
view.
vision.
Yeah, like Terminator vision on Anakin when he's talking to him. And it's like, what's this supposed to convey? Why are you putting us in C-3PO's shoes?
Because C-3PO is getting abandoned by his maker. What do you mean?
Right, but it's like, it's not a filmmaking technique that has been used ever before in any of these movies. Like, it's not part of the cinematic language of Star Wars. And they just pull it out now for this one weird scene that is pointless. And it is so confusing to me.
I do wish it had, like, the little, like, Terminator, like, decals, like, in the corners of the screen. I think that would be cool.
It's like, Anakin, abandoning me, question mark? Please no. Like, just like really pathetic Terminator vision.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Clean floor. Grovel.
Options, beg, cry, speak in English accent. I don't know.
Clean.
Be British.
Tell people the chances of survival only to be told don't never tell me the chances.
Be annoying. And I also, okay, so the politics get better in the second half of this movie, right?
Yes.
Like later on when Amidala is like, oh, my people are being destroyed, we need to take action right now. And they're like, I don't know, we'll think about it. And she's like, no, fuck you, I'm going to impeach you as the main guy. And then you like start to figure out that Palpatine's going to become the new main guy, and you know that he's going to be the Emperor someday. So there's like this cool tension
and you're like,
to
oh,
that.
the pieces.
Yeah, and it like you feel it coming together, and it feels like there are real stakes to the politics this time, you know, as opposed to before when it was just gibberish.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Basically, the biggest thing is that there are absolutely no stakes in the first 20 minutes of this movie. And once we start to care about things and we start to like understand the consequences of actions, all the bad parts of it start to slowly become more interesting.
I do gotta say, because we talked about at the beginning of this film, we're just basically watching one story, and we're not really invested in that story, and it's not very good. But then when we get to the ending of the movie, we have like 4 different plots all going on at the same time. And realistically, I only care about 2 of them.
Right.
So it weirdly flip-flops its whole style. Because at the end of the film, you have the Gungans who are holding off the droids in the war. You have Anakin being an asshole in the pilot. You have the lightsaber fight. And then you have Padme and her friends doing something.
Running
They're doing
around,
something.
shooting
running
guns.
around and shooting windows and using grappling hooks.
Yeah.
But like it's so weird that they just pulled this total 180 from ineffective to a different kind of ineffective. Like it's just it's so weird.
I also think, okay, another big take I have about this is just that Anakin is like so sweet and pure and nice this entire movie. Like he never says anything that's not just like, oh, you're so incredible, I wish I could be more like you, and how can I help everybody around me? I'm so selfless, and I just want what's best for everybody. And then they cut to the Jedi Council being like, no, he's dangerous, we can't take this kid in, horrible things will happen.
Evil!
Evil! Why?
Like, it would be kind of cool, I would like it better if you were, like, kind of an angry, spiteful kid, and then Qui-Gon is like, I see something in this kid, and I know he's angry, and I know he is like at risk. He's an at-risk youth, and Qui-Gon is the one person who's like, I want to stand up for him. Like I want to be the change I want to see in the world for this one kid, you know?
Well, maybe Anakin turns evil because everybody around him is always pointing at him and screeching, "Evil! You will kill us all!" Just all the time.
And eventually he's just like, okay.
Fine.
Right.
Maybe I will.
Also, one of those things, like, all the expanded universe stuff is always like, oh, Qui-Gon Jinn, he was a maverick. He was known for being a rebel and sort of going against the Jedi. But you never really see him do anything that crazy besides, like, stand up for himself about Anakin.
Yoda even says that to Obi-Wan after he dies, and Obi-Wan's like, I have to train Anakin because that's what Qui-Gon wanted, and I'm gonna do what Qui-Gon wanted because he's dead, and you kind of have to let me do this.
Right.
And Yoda's like, I see your rebelliousness of Qui-Gon in you. You don't need that. And it's like, but Qui-Gon literally never disobeyed you this whole movie, this whole film.
He argued passionately against you one time, but then took the L when you still said no. Like,
yeah, but he also argued with you in a setting where he is supposed to argue with you.
Right, yeah.
So I don't even know what you're talking about.
Also, okay, apparently, one of the things I found when I was looking up stuff is apparently Qui-Gon Jinn was the first guy who figured out how to be a Force ghost. I don't know how that works.
That's something you have to figure out?
Yeah, I know.
You have to figure that out?
What does the Jedi afterlife look like then?
Yeah, exactly. Like, was he in heaven somewhere, and he, in heaven, was honing his Jedi techniques still to figure out how to come back?
And just decided to opt out and pop back in to say what's up?
Or did he, like, figure it out while he was alive, and then only start doing it after he died? Like, what does that mean? How does that work?
What does that mean?
Like,
George, why?
That's something I read. Like, it was just like a one-sentence thing on his Wikipedia. Like, he was also the first Jedi to figure out how to be a Force ghost. And it's been like, I can't stop thinking about it ever since.
It doesn't make any sense.
So yeah, the last thing I want to say before we get to just how dope the lightsaber fight is that I like that this movie isn't super winking about the fact that you know what's going on a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the modern version of this movie, like, lately movies that are playing on something that they're counting on the audience knowing, they really like to ham it up and wink at you and, like, drop as many hints as possible. But this movie feels like it is genuinely just played really straight as a story, you know? Like obviously there are moments, like, when Palpatine is getting elected to be the Grand Chancellor or whatever, where it's, like, it's counting on you knowing that to feel the full dramatic irony of it, but they're not, like, rubbing it in, like, how cool it is that they're doing that, and don't you get what we're doing here? Wink, wink, wink. You know?
Yeah. Sorry, it was
hello,
yawning. Yeah,
anybody?
No, I totally get that.
Is this thing on?
Hello?
Okay, I'd like to open the floor for talking about how sick the lightsaber fight at the end is.
It is.
It rules.
It rules.
I also love, there's that Polygon video where Pat Gill talks about like the architecture of Star Wars and like how integral bottomless pits are to the aesthetic of Star Wars for some reason.
Yeah, right?
And then just like I think about it all the time now. And like I love the just like inexplicable laser walls in that sequence.
Yeah. They're dope as hell, and they really add a really cool tension to that fight.
Totally.
But I don't know why they're there, but they're cool.
Right. You're like, I don't know what these are or what purpose
what these is. You're turning into Jar Jar Jackson.
Yeah, I still don't know what those is. But like they're just totally like they totally work, and you buy it in that moment.
Yeah.
You know, as being
like,
adjacent to a room with a bottomless pit in it.
Yeah,
you know?
it's like, oh, this is like a vent or like a timer thing. Like, you kind of justify it, but you also, like, know that you don't need to, because it's gonna happen whether you justify it or not, so.
Right. But yeah, like, okay. I have, like, my big thing is, like, so the Sith always have like some gimmick with their lightsabers, right? They've either got like a double-sided lightsaber, or it's got like the hilt thing, or they've just got two lightsabers because they work that way, or like whatever it is. Because sort of thematically, the whole idea is that they like yearn for just power at whatever cost.
Mm-hmm.
So
and it's also like a perversion of what the Jedi use as well.
Right. It's like taking this idea and being like, no, whatever, like two lightsabers is better than one. But like the Jedi have this idea of like doing things the right way and having a tradition, and like the Jedi uses a lightsaber, and that is what they do. And you know, like Anakin only uses one lightsaber when he's Darth Vader because he, you know, only ever learned to use one lightsaber. And I don't have a good reason for why Palpatine does that, but whatever. Still. But like in the Clone Wars, at a certain point, Ahsoka Tano starts using two lightsabers. And I don't like that. I feel like Jedi should always just have a lightsaber. That's what makes it cool that the Sith always have crazy upgrades on their lightsabers.
Well,
like,
are they trying to make you worried about her? That like she might also be going to the dark side, especially because she's Anakin's Padawan? Or are they not touching on that at all?
They might be doing that. But I guess I want it to be like a canonical thing. Like Jedi are only supposed to use a lightsaber.
Yeah, well, it might just be an unspoken rule, so it can be broken.
Yeah,
you know?
Could be. But yeah, and like this is just another, I've said this a bunch of times, but like this is what George Lucas is good at. And like, you know, you talked about how you don't necessarily have a lot of emotional stakes attached to each of these things he's cutting between, but each of them is really clear and really effectively storyboarded, I guess. And when you're
like
cutting
they're each
between
doing
them,
exactly what they need to be doing.
Yeah, you're cutting between them really interestingly, and each thing makes sense and is clear, and you understand what's going on. Like on a technical level.
Jackson, tell me what Padme's doing.
Right. Okay. My point is, but that's like context around the sequence itself. Though,
yeah. No, I
right?
got you.
Like visually, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I just think that's super impressive because that's like a lot of different things to be cutting back and forth from really quickly, and to have it all track and make sense and be engaging still, you know, especially when you've got something like that lightsaber fight, which is like one of the most high energy action sequences in a movie ever. And like, it never feels like a drop off of energy when you're cutting between that and something else, you know, like you feel the energy carry through into all these things, even though one of them is clearly like kind of the most insane, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did anybody else notice that the lighting on like the big field that the Gungans were fighting in looked very weird?
I mean, the entire sequence is animated basically.
Doesn't look
so
good.
like yeah.
Yeah. It looks like they're fighting on like that one like PC background.
Yeah, no, they're fighting
like
on a
grass
Windows
hill.
95 screensaver.
Like their shadows are like the kind of harsh of like, you know, when it's like simultaneously cloudy and sunny at the same time.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So it's like weirdly dim, but there are still like crisp shadows on everything.
Right.
It looked like that. It was very weird.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Bad.
I mean, it's kind of the same thing that people say about like Marvel movies, you know? Like they always, for their big action set pieces, they always just decide like, oh, we're basically just going to shoot this in a parking lot in Atlanta. And like to put everything else around it, you know, like it's the same thing for this. It's just like we're gonna pick a big open space that's boring, and just count on the things we put inside of it to be the interesting part, you know?
Yeah. I do think the palace set is pretty cool. Though.
palace set fucking
I was
rules.
into that. Yeah.
I can't imagine that was a set that they built. That has to be a building somewhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, probably.
Probably.
Let me see. I'm gonna Google Naboo set location.
It's probably in, like, Dubai or something.
Right.
Is Dubai the one that has that big, tall skyscraper?
Lots of cities have big, tall skyscrapers, Anna.
The one that has, like, the rainforest in it? I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, great. Well,
It's a country that's name starts with a D.
It's like the world's richest country.
Yeah.
Okay, well, first of all, Dubai is not a country, it's a city.
Leave me alone.
Listen, I am dumb.
Okay.
And I live by that.
When I
I don't know things.
When I Google Naboo set location, the only things that are coming up on my Google search are images that look kind of like Naboo, but they are literally 75 by 51 pixels big. So I don't know why this is happening. Anyway, I don't know where it was filmed, and I guess I'll just never know.
Cool.
Okay, so I mean, we're kind of at the end. The song that plays at the end during the big ceremony rips.
Yeah, it does. It's rad.
And they're like, the Gungans and the topside Naboo people get along now. We're friends.
And they have this glowing ball.
It's
that
ceremonial.
we're going to give you.
I kind of like the glowing
have to
ball.
do A New Hope again.
Right. I kind of like the glowing ball, though, because, like, it's just, like, a cool thing that doesn't need to be explained, you know? It's like, oh, yeah, it's probably some kind of ceremonial thing for the Gungans. Like, I buy that. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I did think is weird is that when Qui-Gon dies, they burn his body. And I don't know a lot about ceremonial, like, deaths, especially not in Star Wars. But at the end of Star Wars, when they killed Darth Vader and they burn his body, it seemed appropriate because it was, like, a death of a tyrant and people were, like, celebrating his death. And the only people who were really in mourning was, like, Luke and Leia because they saw the good in him and it was their father. So they're, like, the only ones mourning. So this kind of, like, public blaze, like, kind of makes sense. But when it's just Qui-Gon, it seems kind of brutal to just force everybody to watch his body burn away.
To watch their loved one get, like... I mean, that would be horrifying after a couple of minutes.
Yeah, no, totally. I don't know, maybe that's part of it, though, you know?
But Anakin's 7.
Learn that.
Yeah, I want to watch the flesh of my loved one melt off their skull.
Right,
Yeah.
but it's like they're a military organization, but they're also very spiritual. You know, ashes to
but
ashes.
even with Viking funerals, they put the body away a little bit
in a boat, and they push it out into the water.
and
Right.
then they light it on fire so that you know, but you don't have to see it. They're just in an enclosed room,
Yeah, that's right.
watching Qui-Gon burst into flames.
With no windows.
And it's kind of brutal, and I don't.
And you have to imagine that smell.
Yeah, it just
Yeah,
seemed
burning hair.
weird. It didn't fit.
Yeah, I never really thought of that when I was a kid, because I was like, oh, it's like this solemn moment, and you can
dramatic.
see like the profile of his face and everything. And now I'm like, oh, that would be really gross
This is
for like a lot of
disturbing.
reasons.
Yeah. Well,
But yeah,
because I
okay.
think with Darth Vader's death, when they burn him, I think they're gonna be like, oh, that's like how all Jedi are, like, that's what we do to all Jedi when they die. And I think, no, I think that's what they did with Darth Vader, and I don't think that's a universal thing.
Right. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Presumably
I just think
it
it would be
is.
gross
Nobody
to watch
knows.
your.
I mean, look, there's a lot of things that they just do in the original series that they just decide are part of it in the prequels.
Now, yeah.
Kind of like how in the original movie, Obi-Wan is just wearing gross old desert robes, and they just decided that is
That's
what the
what
Jedi wear all the time. Like,
Yeah, that's true. That's really true.
this costume
Yeah.
design that was just meant to convey that he was a hobo, and they
Yeah.
were like, these are what all the Jedi wear.
Qui-Gon Jinn does wear a poncho, like, the whole movie.
Yeah, he's
to
got
be
like
fair.
a drug rug. It rules.
Yeah.
But also, okay, so tying back into my big point that this movie just doesn't need to exist.
Yeah.
Like, at the end, they're just like, oh, the Trade Federation, we got you, fools. Like, you're done.
Now you're
We
in
stopped
big
you.
trouble.
You wanted to start a war, but you failed, and you're in big trouble now. You're going to have to go face the Senate for your war crimes or whatever. And it's like, hooray, everything's cool. And so you're like, okay, so why'd we even do this whole thing then? Like, if you're building to this really specific thing, why even do this?
Just start with Obi-Wan teaching Anakin at his Padawan and be like, man, remember when we met in the desert? And maybe don't even do that. Maybe just have Obi-Wan have Anakin as a Padawan and I'll accept it.
Start with Obi-Wan, like, teaching, and he'd be like, you could even, like, bring it up in an expositional scene, be like, I didn't think you necessarily needed to be taught, but my master did, and when he died, I took on that responsibility. So that's why I feel it's so important for me to do that. If you just said that without having to see the whole thing, I think that would be pretty powerful. Like, I think that would work. And, like, if you just start with Anakin as, like, a teenager who's just, like, dark and scary, sort of, even though he's still, like, a good guy, you could just sense something's weird about him. Like, that's a perfectly fine place to start a story, you know?
Yeah.
Like, get in, show up late and get out early. That's what they always say. Like, just, you don't need to do this whole movie.
Yeah, you just didn't. You just didn't.
And maybe, I mean, we wouldn't have Darth Maul, which is, maybe something we would have to consider. But we could put him in later.
We would just put him in this one. We would just put him in this new movie.
Sure. Kind of like how we put in the sand.
Yeah, also Darth Maul is also there when Obi-Wan cuts Anakin in half.
Maybe you could just be. I was about to say maybe it could just be Darth Maul instead of General Grievous, but General Grievous is even cooler than Darth Maul.
General Grievous is so cool.
General Grievous is so cool.
I'm excited to talk about Revenge of the Sith because I think that movie secretly kind of rips, and I want to watch it again and make sure it still holds up as much as I think it does. But I think that movie might actually just secretly be super good. Anyway, final thoughts on Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Did not need to exist.
My thought is, it's a movie.
Right.
It is there. It's in the world. I like the music.
We watched it.
Nothing we could do about it now.
That's my final thought. Can't do anything about it now.
Well, that's life.
Say la vie.
Sometimes things happen, and this sure was a thing.
A thing that
Come
did
see, come
indeed
sa.
happen. So, what does that mean?
Shemon.
Mama say, mama sa, mama husa.
Yes.
Oh, and I don't know if I need to keep this in, but I also just think it's really smart because, like, we don't really spend a lot of time on Tatooine in the original movies.
Yeah.
And, like, it's this cool location that you see, like, 2 little parts of, and then you kind of leave. And it's like, I think it's just a smart storytelling decision to just be like, basically the first half of this movie, we're just going to hang out on Tatooine and, like, explore a bunch of the different zones and, like, just live in this space for a while that you love so much already. I think that's a super
place that we've
smart...
established, but not really, like, been in.
Yeah, it's, like, a really satisfying story development. So, hey, guys, do you want to hear a 5-star review of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace?
Of course I do.
I sure do.
This review comes from Letterboxd.com, and this person says, I had a dream I was a Jedi Knight, and I came back and I freed all the slaves, I type, with tears streaming down my face.
Whose perspective is this from?
Anyway, my name's Jackson McMurray.
My name is Adeline McMurray.
And my name's Anna Maguire.
And this is No Nerds Allowed. Phase 2.
And there are no nerds. So wait, who's typing it and crying? Is
Somebody's
it you,
crying.
Jackson?
Somebody's typing and crying. I don't know, I plead the fifth.
It was me. It was me. I was typing